There's two, you have this one or this one.
Are you going to the event in Juanita later? Yeah. Oh, you don't think so? That was tonight, right? You said?
Saturday.
Hmm. Are you?
Morning. Wayne, most of the time, I see myself as the person, and therefore separate from others and separate from day-to-day reality, I guess you could say, day-to-day doings of life around me. So my conviction about you is that you don't seem to be separate from anything or anyone, and therefore my obsession with getting what you have is really kind of futile, because regardless of the thinking process that's going on in phases, I could never get there because I'm already here. And therefore, the best thing I could do at this point is simply to try to be patient
How's that going?
with the process. Well, I'm asking a fairly vacant question, so.
So let's look at what we mean by separation, because there's your projection of how I relate to things may or may not be accurate. Most importantly is how you do, and the separation that we're talking about really has two components. There's the functional separation. You have to be separate from me for us to have a relationship. If we're the same thing, there's no possibility of relationship. There's no possibility of experience. Because to experience, there has to be something experiencing something else, which requires separation. So there's always separation at the level of experience. And we are experiential beings. So at that level, separation is not only inevitable, but it's quite useful. Now, there is a more subtle quality, and this is what this teaching is pointing at, and that is this additional sense that my separation makes me a discrete object. And the term discrete means that I am individuated in a way that I am independent of everything else. So it is this quality of independence that becomes associated with our identities, that we are independent entities, and therefore we are ultimately responsible, because as independent entities, nothing else is playing us. We are playing ourselves. Because we are like a droplet, individuated and isolated from everything else. Now, in this teaching, we talk about all of these objects as waves. So this wave is separate from this wave, and they can relate one wave to the other wave. And even though they are individuated, that they are different waves, they are not discrete. The waves are not discrete. The waves are part of a continuum. And so it is this quality that we are pointing at as being the unifying force that unifies us in our individual aspects. So we are separate one from the other, but we are not independent of one another. We're connected, even though we are separate. So we're both. We're both separate and one. Unified. So it is this illusion of being independent, discrete entities, which is what brings suffering in life. And it is that which the sage simply doesn't have. And that's the quality that you may observe and desire. And that's perfectly understandable, because in that there is an absence of suffering. The suffering arises out of the false sense of being discrete, in the realization that that is not possible, that just that all there is this unified, this unity, then there is no place for the suffering to arise.
I think it's the first time I've heard maybe the first time I've gotten it, that while there is the separation, there's not two of us here. There is a separation in our decision making or our action taking or responsibility, and that's the first time I kind of grabbed that.
What is your name?
Hmm?
What is your name?
Kevin,
Kevin. I remember you, Kevin.
I usually see you in New York, but I took a wrong turn on 42nd Street 4 days later I'm in Santa Monica. Good seeing you.
Good to see you again, Kevin.
But also the idea that this separation and this really holding on to the separation leads to every possible negative feeling. The fear, the anger, all of this stuff comes from the meaning of the understanding that there, or the belief that there is a separation.
Not exactly, Kevin, because the separation, as we say, is functional. It is this quality of
Independent action.
independence in the separation.
Right. Okay.
So what we're really talking about is in independence, not separation.
Right.
Separation is what enables us to function.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Is so powerful is because.
Mm-hmm.
So when you recognize yourself to another object,
Mm-hmm.
another wave, so the waves have to be, quote, separated in space and time in order for there to be experience,
Right.
for the drama, the lila, the play of life to go on. And part of the drama and play of life is pleasure and pain. So you are absolutely correct. Without that separation, there's no pleasure, there's no pain, there's no joy, there's no sorrow, there's no health, there's no sickness. None of the polaric opposites exist. But that's the building block of life, of life as we experience it. So the alternative to that is zero, zip, nothing. And in some traditions, that's the highest state, of samadhi, and you go into a state where like nothing's going on. That doesn't interest me. I have no desire for that. What I'm concerned with is living with joy and sorrow and pleasure and pain and all the rest of it without suffering. Such that even the pain is immediate. Even the pain, no matter how intense and difficult and unpleasant it is still part of the vivacity of life.
Yeah, there's one aspect of staying within the samadhi, so to speak, and nothing. But there's another aspect to take action or a subtle attention in that oneness or in that samadhi. That's another approach to the experience.
But in the samadhi, there's nothing happening. There's nothing to have a subtle attention on. I mean, that's the definition of samadhi.
Right. Okay.
The samadhi state. The joke is the monk goes into the samadhi state and he's out in the garden and he's sitting there and it gets rained on and the birds poop him on him and everything goes on for you know, for a month, and he comes back out of the samadhi, and he looks around, and all his disciples are there, and go, oh, well, you know, and he says, boy, I'm really hungry, you know, please, you know, get me, you know, a sandwich, or rice and dal, probably, get, you know, give me something to eat. So they go off to get him something to eat, and he's waiting, and he goes back into samadhi, and 3 months go by, and gets rained on and pooped on, and you know, all the rest of it. He comes back out of the samadhi after 3 months. He looks around and goes, "Where's my sandwich?" What is your name?
Ryan.
Ryan. Have we met before, Ryan?
No, it's my first time here. Kind of came here on blind faith.
I see.
We had no idea what I was getting into.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And how did that come about? How did you...
I know Joanne, and kind of on a similar path, and she thought it would be interesting, and gone really deep into, I think, my search spiritually, and I've just become pretty open to a lot of different sources of information. I've been studying the Kabbalah. I've gotten into Freemasonry and a lot of esoteric schools of thought. I've also was sober for about 8 years. Started at like age 17. Had like a really dark childhood and all that. And I guess in this like search for higher meaning, I've just started opening up a lot of doors. Kind of driving me mad a little bit, where I'm trying to piece together what all these different schools of thought are really trying to say. I go deep into meditation constantly. I've recently, having been completely sober for a long period of time, started getting into like more psychedelic research, which has led me into a really deep ego dissolution, like questioning a lot of things, and I don't know. I just kind of came here just to see what there was to possibly gain or give.
Well, you're most welcome. We'll see what you find here. If there's one thing that perhaps you can take away today, it's to consider the possibility that none of these traditions or none of these methodologies that you've investigated, including this one, are the truth.
Not totally.
So at best, they are pointers.
Yeah.
So when trying to reconcile, you know, this one with that one, inevitably you're going to run into difficulties, because the pointers are quite different and diverse, and Freemasonry versus Kabbalah versus Sufism versus Advaita versus
been saying a lot of hermeticism too.
So all these traditions and these teachings all point you to something, and the pointer where it's pointing to is the same thing,
Yeah.
but the way of pointing is vastly different.
Yeah.
And so it is ultimately, I believe, impossible to reconcile the specifics of the various teachings.
Yeah. I mean, probably the biggest conclusion I've come to recently, and I'm sure you're knowledgeable on this topic, is it seems like all of them are, from Christianity to like all these different things are pointing to you have latent energy within you, and once that's anointed to the pineal gland is when you can reach the highest form of human consciousness or godlike consciousness. For example, like there's 33 steps in Jacob's ladder, and it's a reference to like the 33 columns of the spine leading to the Pingala, and you know, like it's like all of it seems like an astrological allegory or an allegory explaining the metaphysics of like you know, activating different parts of your brain and stuff like that, or like the Kundalini energy, you know, seeing that symbol, the pine cone. It just seems like there's all these themes leading to the highest source of consciousness being anointing your pineal gland, and it seems like there's 100 different ways to get there. So I guess I'm trying to find the correct path and learn how to do that. But
I unfortunately can't help you. I know nothing about the pineal gland, unfortunately, so
yeah,
I can't help you with that one.
I'm reading this book by Joe Dispenza called Becoming Supernatural. Have you heard of that book?
No, I haven't.
It gives like some step-by-step instructions that are backed by like science and medical evidence and stuff like that. It's a pretty interesting book. But anyways, that's just kind of what I'm doing personally. I just turned 26 like a few days ago, and I feel like I'm on a pretty interesting path in life.
It sounds like it. I mean, to me, when I discovered spirituality, and my path is somewhat similar to yours, that I got sober, I was introduced to the possibility of a spiritual answer to living through the 12 steps, and that opened up a world that I didn't know existed.
Totally, 100%.
And I began to explore it.
Yeah.
And it is, I feel, one of the most exciting adventures you can engage in. And there is so much cool stuff that you can do, you know, under that umbrella of, quote, you know, spiritual seeking. I mean, you've barely scratched the surface.
No, totally.
You know, as everyone, you know, it's impossible to get much below the surface. There's too much on the surface. You can't, you know, you can't experience all this stuff. Even, you know, we've got, you know, 30 or 40 year seekers here who have just scratched the surface because there is so much to explore.
Totally. And
where it takes you and what you encounter along the way and what you experience along the way, who knows? Who knows? But it's exciting. It's wondrous. It's amazing. And so, you know, I would urge you forward.
I'm going somewhere.
Yeah, like that we all are.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
like you can just trust what you see, and what you see is this. So it's always exists this, right? Like what you see, and it doesn't matter what is happening. It can be like doing like some like tripping, some different dimensions, or you see this. It's only what you see, including your body. So it's seeking, trying to find yourself. So basically, trying to see who is looking all this, who's watching all that, right?
Yeah.
So this is the point of like the question Ramana Maharshi who's asking like who I am, right? Just trying to see who is watching on, who is like all these feelings arising, and who is like thoughts, feelings, and so basically lately I started like feeling like I'm not what I used to think what I am. It's kind of like, so I was thinking like I'm just only this. Now it's kind of like I see myself, like what I see like, from my perception, my body and everything. So it feels like it's kind of like all the same thing, and you're the one who's like watching from here, all this. So now like I probably have to like try to find who's watching.
That's the pointer, yes. You peel another layer off the onion.
Yeah, like it's not possible to see yourself, right? Or you can. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like the way you feel yourself is different. It's like just like being human being is just a word. I'm human being, but you don't know what is this. Like what you are.
Yeah.
Just have all this feeling arising in you, like emotions, but like what you are, it's, you can understand what you are. But it is not possible like to look at yourself and find who's watching, right?
I don't know. Try it.
Try it.
Okay. Just because something is not possible doesn't mean it's not worth doing. Which, if you can follow all the double and triple negatives in that statement, it makes sense.
And I guess I have to accept my obsessive thinking.
If you can, yes, by all means do.
And if I can't, what should I do? It's just like,
You suffer.
yeah. Yeah, just find a way, that obsessive thinking of find a way for peace, and that.
If you can. Yes. But in this teaching, peace is not a goal. Peace is not an objective. It's not a place to get to. It is a byproduct. It's a byproduct of recognizing your true nature. And And that is why Ramana Maharshi's emphasis on who are you? What are you? What are you?
Mhm.
In the recognition of this, then the peace is, that is the peace. The recognition of that is the peace.
Mhm.
But when we're seeking peace, what we're really seeking is the elimination of the suffering we're feeling.
Mhm.
You see, as a goal, as an objective, and there are 10,000 different ways to get to that goal
Mhm.
that are proposed. But here in this teaching, it is the pathless path, the goalless goal. And what we're concerned with is coming right back to the fundamental question of what are you? Are you, in fact, an independent being, or are you an aspect of something vastly larger? What are you?
Yeah, sometimes I touch it, and that tendency that I want to hold on to that, you know.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah.
What to do with that, fear terrorizing you? It's like if something like real, you feel like something gonna happen tomorrow. So you don't know what's gonna happen tomorrow. No one promised you it's gonna be like good day for you tomorrow. It's like you can have cancer, someone can die, and it's like, but even in that like present moment right now, nothing happening. But it's just like constant like fear that it's like you're so blind. You don't know like gonna be like next moment. And this fear like always arising you, like what if you're not gonna have money, or what something gonna happen, just like constant fear. Is there anything you can do with it, or just arising you?
Well, again, it is a byproduct of something else. That projected fear comes out of your perceiving your lack of control. That you don't have sufficient control to guarantee a particular outcome. And yet, the fear arises from the possibility of control. So there is a sense that I could, if I were, if I were spiritual enough, if I were competent enough, if I were this enough, then I would be able to manage things such that my life wouldn't be a fearful one. I would get everything lined up in such a way that this is, so the possibility of organizing or managing to produce a state in which there's no fear is what paradoxically brings the fear. Because part of you knows that's impossible. Part of you knows there's too much to control. That no matter how efficient I am and how strong I am, that there's something could happen out of my control. There's just too much. It's too big. And I can't keep the plane from falling into the building. No matter how much I could control things, plane can fall out of the sky. So, in this teaching, we come back. We don't have any solutions for managing your fear. Not here. There's lots of them, but not here. What we're concerned with here is what is at the root of the fear. And in the fundamental question of Ramana Maharji's question of who are you? What are you? In the recognition of that, this projected fear doesn't arise. It's not answered. It simply doesn't arise. It doesn't come up. So.
It's scary, to surrender, let go of the control. You think you have control.
Well, that it is very scary to surrender control when you think you have it, and nobody's going to do that. The only possibility is the recognition that you never had it in the first place. That this control that you're afraid of relinquishing is not something you have. It's a fantasy. So that's the first step, is in recognizing that you don't have the control to begin with, to surrender. And with grace, you begin to see it. You see your own powerlessness. Fundamentally. And it may start with one thing. Okay, I'm powerless over that. I can't control that. Okay? And then it expands.
What do you think, or if I'll be eating healthier, then I'm not gonna get sick, or if I will be doing this, and it still doesn't mean that it's not gonna happen if it's supposed to happen.
Exactly.
So
Which doesn't mean that you start guzzling, gallons of Coca-Cola. Because clearly, there are no experiential health benefits associated with drinking 3 gallons of Coca-Cola every day.
No, that's a feeling if I'll be doing something better, for living and everything, then nothing gonna happen. It's kind of that kind of belief.
Yeah. It's whistling past the graveyard. It's things we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel better, but we don't know what's going to happen. Truly. So you may have a much healthier corpse when the plane falls through you.
about like the present moment. So the present moment exists only what it is right now, right? So kind of like outside, what we saw outside like a couple of minutes ago, it's just the image in our consciousness. So all exists is this thing. So outside right now doesn't exist.
Pardon me?
Like right now, as well, like we see outside, it doesn't exist. Like because it just exists what you see, right? Or
Okay. That philosophically, yes, we can certainly say that.
I'm just thinking in my head, this whole relinquishment of responsibility, is our greatest responsibility.
It can be turned into that. But in following up on our theme for today, the relinquishing of responsibility is not something that we do. It's something that happens. It is a byproduct.
Yeah, it's a great step.
It is a byproduct. Because it is truly a seeing that there's no responsibility to relinquish. That we never had the inherent power to control. I mean, responsibility comes with control. They're linked one with the other. When that control is seen as a chimera, as having no substance, then this notion of responsibility, personal responsibility as the author of something is...
Responsibility was a sweet word, but it's really control.
Yeah. They're intimately tied together.
Mm.
We're both the expression and the expressor, right? Wouldn't you say? Like we're the expression, but we're also this aspect of totality which has a creative expression. So we're both, right?
We could say that, certainly.
Say that.
Sure.
Like there's sort of there's the experience of like individual consciousness and also like a, I don't know, cosmic consciousness or higher
Yes, but there's no experience
of that.
of that.
Mm-hmm. But can't you be in the experience of the individual consciousness but feel the creation of the cosmic consciousness?
Yes, as an experience, you can, but all experience is limited. So that spaciousness that you experience is still within the context of the knower and the known. So we point, and those are all valid and very powerful pointers to a quality of transcendence, which isn't even a quality. It is transcendence itself, what we talk about as mystical knowing, which is knowing without a knower. But there's no quality to that. It only becomes experiential, quote, after the fact, after the knower reemerges to know and that which can't be known in that way. So it's I mean, structurally it's kind of difficult to talk about what happens. And their mystical poetry has been around for thousands of years as pointing to that unity, pointing to that expansion, pointing to that oneness. And in an attempt to elicit it, to bring some kind of
So you talk about like there's this experience of like expansion when you're in the flow and
Yes.
it's almost as like you could flick a switch. You're like poof, quit smoking, poof, da poof, right? It's almost like a switch. Like it's all possible. Like there's this, I don't know, access. There's access to some healing. It's like this guy Joe Dispenza, he has this story of like he got hit by a car and his spine was like destroyed and he laid in bed for 10 weeks and visualized his spine coming back together, and then he got up and walked out of the hospital.
It's a great story.
It's a great story, right?
Yeah, lots of them.
Lots of them, right?
Lots of stories.
Lots of stories.
Yeah.
And it feels
The
like
the Bible's full of them.
Full of
I mean,
yeah.
guy is nailed to a cross, gets out of the cave and walks around
Right.
because he's the Son of God. I mean, there's great stories.
Right.
Yes, there's no shortage of stories.
Right.
So, what is your experience? This is the quality. This is what we're after. What is your experience?
Yeah. So my experience is that in these experiences of expansion,
Yeah.
there seems to be tremendous ability to do extraordinary things. And then
So tell me about some of those extraordinary things that you've done. I'm curious.
like tapping into knowing, even saying something like intuitively knowing how to respond in a particular situation. Whereas in a moment of contraction, there's no awareness of that. Like in one moment, you could hear about a certain situation and it would be catastrophic and awful and terrible and you'd freak out about it. And another moment, there'd be total peace about it and there'd be a total trust that all is well and you're not believing the appearance that something's wrong and you're at peace. So what distinguishes those two experiences? In one of them, you feel a deep connectedness and oneness with the truth of what you are, and in another moment you don't.
If you can draw those parallels and they are consistent in your experience, such that, because what I'm hearing here, when you talk about accessing, when you're talking about controlling. You say, okay, now I can, in this state, I can manipulate this. I can control this because I have this additional power. And that may be the case. You may, in a moment, be given
Be given
a particular power.
Yes.
But you're not accessing. See, this is the thing. You're given it. You're not accessing it.
Okay, be given it.
So, yes, in a particular moment, things flow to you. In another moment, they don't. But when you talk about accessing, you're now talking about your control of it, your gathering it.
Okay.
And this is the distinction that is huge.
Yes. That's good, thank you.
It is like I know about Dr. Dispenza. I've been in his retreat actually. Now it seems to me that what happened to him, it's been given to him. But now he is trying to teach you that you can have that access. That's what, you know?
Yes, I know.
Yeah, I know because my daughter was dealing with cancer. That's what we did all this retreat, but she couldn't to access to that and heal herself, you know, and she passed.
Yeah.
That's the thing that we feel we have control, and now I'm going to teach you how you have the control over
And if
that.
it failed, it's because you didn't do it right,
Yes.
you weren't a good student, or you didn't take the $150,000 advanced class,
Right.
Exactly, that's what it
which
brought
is
a
where
lot
the
of-
real truth is. You know, the real message, that's where you really get to access.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's,
And
I mean,
it brought a lot
they're all
of
over the place.
anger in all of us actually by doing and going
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
doing all that. Yes.
there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And they're exciting. I'm not saying don't do them. I'm just saying that when what you're being told is that the reason this isn't working is because you're not doing it well enough, you haven't advanced high enough, and that what you really need to do is pay more to get more.
Yes.
That's the point. You go, wait a minute,
Yes.
perhaps.
Yes.
So. Because there's an intense desire, and there are a lot of people who are more than happy to provide fulfillment for the desire.
I mean, just on this whole topic, I've had experiences where I did have complete control. Like it seemed as if I realized that a lot of my reality was a manifestation of my subconscious thought.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go into a deep enough state of meditation,
Mm-hmm.
or through other experiences I've had the ability to rearrange my subconscious thought patterns, which then influence my reality to become something different.
Uh-huh.
So is that not control?
You can call it control if you like, and we do. I would call it control. I watch this. I'm going to pick up this glass.
Totally.
I have control. I can control my body, and I'm able to do this time.
Yeah.
Now, because I'm given that control, it is equally possible that I will say, I'm going to pick up the glass, and I go to reach for it, and as I turn, I spasm. My muscle spasms.
Right.
And I can't do it
In that moment.
in that moment. So in a given moment, we're given control and the ability to control something, and in the next moment, we don't have that control.
Yeah.
Now, to control everything, that's another matter entirely.
Right.
I mean, I personally have never had a moment in which I was given the ability to control everything. If I had, the world would look a lot different.
Right. I guess what I was getting at is having the discipline within you to ignore that spasm and wait until it's appropriate to, like, you're still producing the same result. Like I was nearly paralyzed recently,
Yeah.
and from that book that I was talking about that everyone else has been mentioning, my sciatic nerve got like really compressed. My L5 was completely out of place, and I was supposed to be in a wheelchair for a very long time. Through that meditation, and I was prescribed Dilaudid, and I was a former heroin addict, and it was like a very scary thing for me.
Yeah. Okay.
I was able to completely manage taking narcotic substance after my whole life I was conditioned to believe I couldn't. And
Okay.
then within 2 weeks I was walking again and completely active and back into my... But it seemed like it was a product of the meditation.
If that works for you, I'm the last person on the planet to say, don't do it.
Right.
What I'm saying is, how is it that sometimes you can access this, sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't? What's going on? That's what I'm proposing you to look at, that's all.
Right.
What's at play here, ultimately, in what is happening?
Right.
That's the focus of this teaching.
Totally.
Because miracles abound.
Definitely.
And I am sure that there are thousands of people lying with broken spines trying their best to heal their broken spines and are still lying there. One guy tried his best to heal his broken spine and it worked. It worked for him. I don't doubt him for a second. It worked for him. Now, in this teaching, we say, what's at play here? What enabled this to work for this guy, and it doesn't enable it to
no
work for
different
somebody
from
else?
somebody who walks into AA, gets a sponsor, works
Amen.
the 12 steps, and stays sober,
Exactly.
and another person does the exact same thing, and they commit suicide, or they drink again, or whatever. They can't stay sober. I mean, it's just inconsistent. It's not necessarily about what you do or you don't do necessarily.
That's right.
The results are.
So, once again, what is it that's at play? That's what we're concerned with. What is responsible for what happened? And the teaching doesn't answer the question. The teaching is only inviting you to look for yourself. Say, what's going on here? How is it that this works in this moment and it doesn't work in the next moment? What's going on? How is it works for this guy, it doesn't work for this guy? What's going on?
On Thursday, there was this conversation about being a joyful seeker or miserable seeker.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen, because I told you I was actually a joyful seeker, and you told me, yes, but it can change to miserable in some. And I have seen because there was a sadness about, but more than a sadness, some guilt in advance if it turns to be miserable, you know. And so I've seen how this false sense of authorship was still working. Because if it turns to miserable seeker, it will be my fault. So I'm seeing that I could let this go.
Good.
morning up there, I read it, I laid in. And this guy was in prison for committing brutal